This is a Parsha podcast brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study, and I'm your host, Yosefa Fogel-Rubel. Let's learn. Welcome back to the Matan podcast. This week's episode is devoted to the holiday of Sukkot, but it also continues with the theme of our Dvarim series, which focused on mitzvot in their biblical context and explored where these ideas are taken in the halachic realm. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the support of Rabbi Joel and Shalamis Cohen family, who year in and year out support our Elul learning in Matan, in memory of Rabbi Dr. Akiva Predmesky and Rebbetzin Bertie Predmesky by their children. Today's episode is dedicated in memory of Barry Morris, Zichrono Livracha, beloved father of Debbie Morris Niderberg. Mr. Morris was a judge by profession and a Jewish educator by temperament and passion. An extraordinary father who showered his family with unconditional love and wisdom. He was a role model and a community leader in Teaneck, New Jersey, and served as the president and adult education chairperson of his shul. Torah learning and women's education were very important to him. Be in touch with me at podcast@matan.org.il or with the Matan office to sponsor podcasts for the new year. It's a great way to mark your occasion and help this listening community grow. I am honored to introduce my partner in today's conversation, Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter. Hi, Rabbi Schacter.
Hello. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
I'm so happy we finally got you on this format. Rabbi Dr. Jacob J. Schacter is University Professor of Jewish History and Jewish Thought and Senior Scholar at RIETS, which is the Theological Seminary of Yeshiva University. From 2000 to 2005, he served as Dean of the Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik Institute in Boston, and from 1981 to 2000, he served as the Rabbi of the Jewish Center in Manhattan. Rabbi Schacter has also been teaching for 3.5 decades in Stern, which is where I met him as one of my professors. He is the co-author of Modern Heretic and a Traditional Commentary, Mordechai M. Kaplan, Orthodoxy and American Judaism, which was published in 1996, and the editor of Jewish Tradition and the Non-Traditional Jew from 1992, and Judaism's Encounter with Other Cultures, Rejection or Integration from 1997. He has published numerous articles and reviews in Hebrew and English, and is the founding editor of the Torah Umadas Journal. Okay, Rabbi Schacter, I'm so thrilled that you're here today for this podcast.
So I can't begin to tell you how thrilled I am. First, it's really an honor to be here. I know it took us a little while till we were able to get together. And I want to be makir tov to you because I have heard from a number of people that on different occasions you have acknowledged having sat in my class at Stern College. And you said some really sweet, nice things about me. And it's so wonderful to be able to be here with you, to see what you have become, how you have developed into a foremost Torah teacher, how you have hundreds, probably thousands of students by now, in terms of direct teaching and in terms of long-distance teaching. My respect for you is enormous, and I'm deeply honored to have this opportunity to interact with you around the study of Torah. I also want to say I heard that you mentioned Joel and Shalamis and Debbie Niderberg. So these are people with whom I have very close relationships. And the fact that they are part of this conversation is deeply meaningful to me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, really, really. I'm so happy to be able to do this. And I'm also happy to be able to do this really around the kind of topics that I know I've learned with you in the past, and I think that we really like to speak about, which is sort of this bridge between the psukim, the way that different Rishonim and Achronim look at different mitzvot, sort of a little bit of a journey we're going to take from the biblical text and onward in sort of I would say the halachic history, and then of course to look at the way that the particular mitzvah we want to focus in on today really impacts our lives. And our conversation today is going to be around the mitzvah of Simchat HaChag, which is sort of a command, so to speak, to be joyful. It comes from the psukim around the Chag of Sukkot, and we're looking here at Dvarim, Perek Yud Zayin, the 17th chapter of Dvarim. It starts in Yud Gimel in the 13th pasuk and continues. I'll just read a few and sort of set the stage for our conversation. Chag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha shiv'at yamim ba'asfecha migarnecha u'miikvecha. That you're going to have a Chag Sukkot, which in its initial presentation is our agricultural holiday where we're gathering all of our plenty. And that'll be the first most natural anchor for the feeling of simcha, for the feeling of fullness, of a joy. Maybe we'll see how we translate it. That'll be part of our conversation today. The psukim continue, ושמחת בחגיך, אתה ובנך וביתך ועבדך ועמתך והלוי והגר והיתום והאלמנה אשר בשעריך. And you're going to have joy, experience joy in this chag with your family, with your servants, right? With all of those who are in your household in the immediate and broader sense. And then a few psukim later, we have another emphasis on this joy. Shivat yamim tachog la'Hashem Elokecha b'makom asher yivchar Hashem, ki yivrechecha Adonai Elohecha b'chol tvuotcha u'b'chol ma'aseh yadecha v'ayita ach sameach. And here, where you go to the mikdash, and you, what we know, are also going to bring korbanot, we have another mention of the fact that you're going to be joyful. And so while we will extend this joy to all of the holidays, essentially, of the Shloshet Regalim, of Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot, the nexus of it, or like the anchor of it, really is in these psukim is really in the psukim about Sukkot. And therefore, we want to explore what this mitzvah means. What does it mean to have this kind of joy on Chag? The anchor is in Sukkot, but of course it relates to all of the Chagim. So why don't we jump in there? Meaning, how does this mitzvah get defined as time continues?
I think what makes this question so important and so significant is that essentially we're being commanded to feel something. Simcha basically is joy, happiness, and normally we're accustomed to being commanded to do things, not to do things, even to believe things, not to believe things. But what we have here is the interrelationship between action and emotion, between doing something and feeling something, and they're both part of this mitzvah, which is what makes it so, I would say, somewhat unique, but particularly interesting. So Chazal, at the end of Masechet Pesachim, talk about Bameh Misamcham. They quote the pasuk that you just quoted, and so how does this happen? And the Gemara does not say, well, you just walk around and you feel happy and you feel good and we're done. We sing songs, we dance, and it's very wonderful. But they're actually actions. So it depends. The Gemara develops, there's a gender difference between how men are happy, yayin, how women are happy, clothing. What kind of clothing? Well, it depends. There's also a geographic distinction between, depending on where that particular woman is, will determine the kind of clothing. And then the Gemara says, well, in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, simcha was basar, but now ain't simcha ela biyayin. So what we're left with is actions. So we drink wine, we eat meat, we wear nice clothes. The Rambam adds, we get candies for the kids. It's not in the Gemara, the Rambam adds. So it's all action. So that's already really interesting, because the verb is happy, and the fulfillment of this verb, which is a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah d'oraita, is to act in a particular way.
I think that the Gemara is trying to sort of revert back to how we're used to learning Torah, meaning, as you said, the emotion is unusual, and then in general, Halacha likes to quantify things. We don't like to leave it up to people's moods. It's not particularly reliable, and so we attach a particular action to this, and that makes it more familiar. Oh, we know how to be told what to do. And I think, though, that a deeper point is that we don't usually look at Torah as defining the contours of people's interiority, meaning that it's almost like an abrogation of people's autonomy. I know that's like a modern word, but I think that it's deep in the way that Halacha works, that we can't tell people exactly how they're supposed to feel. And so we hope that these kinds of actions produce a happiness, but I would say even more than that, but we, God forbid, don't want to just rely on these physical elements. We want to make sure that people actually get to that interior space of happiness. It's really easy to just leave it at buy a new dress, be happy about the new dress, but clearly the Torah is saying something much deeper than that.
Right. The issue about undermining one's autonomous interiority in terms of emotion is actually complicated, because there are other mitzvot that also seem to do that. Ahavat Hashem, Yirat Hashem, Lo Tachmod. So the Ibn Ezra famously says, how can you tell me not to feel? If I'm feeling something, how could you make a Isur D'Oraita to feel? So these all have in common the notion, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So there are these mitzvot, of which Simchat Yom Tov is a paradigmatic example, but it's not alone, and I think each one of them needs to be unpacked in terms of recognizing, on the one hand, there's a deep emotional core here, but on the other hand, we can't legislate emotion. And the problem is, it seems that the Torah is legislating emotion. And we find that in all of these cases, there's a huge attempt to try to figure out, well, what's the action that's associated with Ahavat Hashem, Yirat Hashem, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. They're framed in the context of actions, but you're absolutely right, and we should never lose sight of the fact that it can't stop at the action, but the action is designed to elicit within us a particular something. A particular sensibility, a particular feeling. Let's call it joy, let's call it happiness. But it's a huge challenge. You know, Rabbi Soloveitchik famously has a passage in an article entitled Catharsis, where he talks about how someone, Rahman al-Islam, lost a close relative, and it's Erev Yom Tiv, and they sit Shiva for 7.5 minutes, and then whoa, hi, whoa, happy, good Yom Tiv, we're going to shul, everybody's happy. How does that work? And what does that mean? And so he has a very interesting definition of simcha, based on an analysis of this pasuk. He asks, how could the Torah legislate an emotion? And then, there's a Gemara at the end of Brachot, the Mishnah says, Chayav Adam levarech al hara'ah, Geshem shemevarech al hatova. Person has to make a bracha when bad things happen, just like they make a bracha when good things happen. And the Gemara, Amar Rava, my kashem, what is just like? So it can't be the same text of the bracha, because that same Mishnah 3 lines earlier said, when a good thing happens, hatova hametiv, and when Rachmana litzlan, not a good thing happens, it's Baruch Dayan ha'emet. So it can't be. Maike Amar Rava elo lekablinhu bisimcha. Samach Amid Bet in Masachet Brachot. Ask Rabbi Soloveitchik, lekablinhu bisimcha? I understand simcha when I make a hatova hametiv, so I have a better bottle of wine at the table, or I win the lottery and I make a lot of money and I'm thankful to God, and I don't just express the gratitude, but I feel simcha. But are you trying to tell me that when I'm standing at the open grave, Rachmana litzlan, of one of my 7 closest relatives, and I'm tearing kriya, and I'm saying Baruch Dayan Emes, B'Shem U'Malchut, that I have to feel simcha? It's cruel. It's impossible. What do we mean by simcha? And so Rabbi Soloveitchik suggests, and he takes it away from the realm of action, and he introduces a third level. So there's an emotion, and there's an action, and he introduces the level of awareness. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says, how could this be? I thought simcha means I'm happy. Are you trying to tell me chayav kishem? It's not just I should be happy. I should be as happy as when I win the lottery of $100 million? And he suggests that if you look at the psukim, you're doing dvarim now. The beginning in Parshat Re'eh in particular, but there may be 15 places where the Torah juxtaposes v'samachta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Lifnei Hashem Elokechem usmachtem. They're side by side in the biblical text. Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, it's not a coincidence. The reason why they're together is because the Torah is trying to tell us, you know what simcha means? Lifnei Hashem. Simcha means at its core to have an awareness and an appreciation that we live our lives in the presence of God. It's not, woo, whoopee-doo, wonderful, happy, And it's not eating meat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that and it's that. But at its core, it's Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. And Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem is what brings simcha. And so he says, you can legislate that, because I'm not legislating an emotion. I am inviting you. I am bidding you to recognize when good things happen and bad things happen. When someone says Baruch Dayan Emet and they're heartbroken, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo Ki Chol Derachav Mishpat. This also unfolds in the presence of God, and that's what the bracha is, and that's what simcha is.
So I want to go one step back in something you said earlier, and then respond to two parts of that. One is that I want to just fill in for our audience that we learn the halacha that Chag cancels Shiva from these psukim. Okay, meaning that's part of what Chazal learn out from in Masechet Moed Katan, that you can't have that kind of simcha on Chag if you're going to be in that state. And so that's a huge piece that some people have met in their personal lives, and some people it'll never be something that they experience. That also comes out of here. So I wanted to fill in that piece for some of our audience from earlier.
Can I fill in the fill-in?
Yeah.
The Gemara says in Moed Katan that there's no Avelut on Yom Tov, because Simcha de Rabim, that's a lashon of the Gemara, Doche Avelut de Yachid.
Yeah.
So it's Rabbi Soloveitchik, again, in a long footnote in Ubikashtem Misham, which is one of his earlier works.
And harder works.
And hard, but it's been translated into English in a very good translation.
Yeah.
Suggests as follows. He says, I'll prove to you that emotions matter in Jewish law, and I'll prove it to you from this halacha. He says, because on the level of action, an Avel and someone who's celebrating the holiday, there's no mutual exclusivity. There's no contradiction. Whatever an Avel has to do, so you want to sit on the floor, you can sit on the floor on Yom Tov. You want to wear sneakers, you can wear sneakers on Yom Tov. You want to eat meat, you could eat meat, an Avel can eat meat. In other words, in that level of behavior, there's no mutual exclusivity. It's in the level of feeling and the level of awareness, because he says, Simchat Yom Tov is standing in the presence of God. When God forbid somebody is a mourner, they don't feel the presence of God. They're supposed to say Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo, and they do, but they're feeling distant, and I would say angry. They're upset. You know, in Mirz Hashem, we should be zocha that our parents should live till 106, and they should have full lives, but we are now living in this moment in Medinat Yisrael when there are tragedies of monumental proportions. And you know that better than I do. And you're standing there with a child, with a spouse, and you feel distant from God. And that's where the halacha comes. There can be no Avelut on Yom Tov. There could be no Simcha in Avelut. They're mutually exclusive from that pasuk. So there's this third level, the third level of, I feel happy, I do things that, as you correctly point out, should lead me to be happy, and then I live my life. This notion of Bisimcha, as you also pointed out, Torah scholar Rubel, is not just on Sukkot, and it's not just on Shalosh Regalim. There's actually, Yerushalmi says on Rosh Hashanah, Ochlim Vishotim Usmechim, even on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Hadin, because it infuses the totality of our existence. We live our lives conceptually, bisimcha, recognizing that everything that happens to us is unfolding in the presence of the Ribono Shel Olam.
You know, what I think is really interesting about the movement of the halacha, and then as you're bringing in the Parshanut of Rav Soloveitchik, is that we've gone from interiority to actions back to interiority, but adding nuance to what that interiority looks like. Meaning we have to be careful of a glib kind of translation of happiness or even joy. I happen to like joy because I think joy insinuates many levels to it.
That's great. But how do you define it when you say, I happen to like joy? What do you mean?
So to me, joy is an interior space of recognizing goodness. But that doesn't mean that I don't also recognize horrific realities. And I think that all those pieces by Rav Soloveitchik really lean into that. By the way, the other flip positive side of another halacha we learn out from V'samachta b'chagecha is also that we can't have a chatuna on Chag, is because you can't, and Marvin Simcha b'simcha, because you can't, again, there, Rav Hirsch says also, he uses the word toda'ah of a consciousness. When you can't have a consciousness of that private simcha when you're in the consciousness of a general tzibur simcha that you have on the Chag. So it's interesting to see, in the positive side where that comes in as well.
You talked about joy that needs to be contoured, that needs to be structured. That emotion is very centrally important in Judaism, but it's not unbridled and it's not self-determined. And there has to be a geder, there has to be a structure, there has to be an understanding. And that, to me, addresses and raises what I consider is the greatest, most fundamental challenge to personal religiosity in the times in which we live. We live at a time when we have personal autonomy and individual choice. Nobody forces us to do anything. We live in a democracy. We live in a culture that, certainly in the United States, you could do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody. And that seeps in very much into the ethos, even within the so-called religious or observant community. But on the other hand, a mitzvah means a commandment. A mitzvah does not mean a good deed. Mm-hmm. A good deed, so I did a good deed, tomorrow I'll do another good deed. And if there's a commandment, that means there's a commander with a big C, and there's a commandee with a little c, and that's me. And so, on the one hand, Rabbi Soloveitchik, in the hesped that he gave for his machatenista, for my teacher's mother, Mrs. Tversky, the Tonler Rebbitzin, talked about that he learned from his mother that Judaism is both formal compliance with the law, and I'm quoting now, and the law as a living experience. And how to merge these two, how to have one infuse the other, is really the greatest avodah, because we want to experience. There's so much of our culture is about experiencing and feeling good and trying to help ourselves reach a state of equanimity and calmness and joy and fullness, seeing the good, as you pointed out before. And that's a living experience, and we see that in Torah. But at the same time, it's a formal compliance. He talks about in another essay published in Family Redeemed, he talks about romance and requirement. So that's fascinating. When I read it, I was shocked. My relationship to God is like a romance. I always thought it had to do with a man and a woman and a woman and a man, and I had and have romantic feelings to my wife. And now these feelings of love to Hashem, so there's a feeling. But I can't just walk around and close my eyes and sing and play guitar, and I have to act. And that's where this simcha comes in.
So there's an essay that I love, and I never go a year without teaching it to my students. It was 2 shirim that were given by Rav Amital when he was the Rosh Yeshiva. I think it was from 2000. It's not that old. And it's then gets recasted with the name of Hitchabrut ve'mechuyavut. Because in Israel, the catchphrase is להתחבר, right? Do I connect or not? It's sort of like the holiest word you could speak of in the Jewish world. And that essay, which appears, you can also find it online in English and in Hebrew, and it also appears in a book of his collected works of Be'ol Panecha Yitalechun. And there he talks exactly about those two pieces you just said. On one hand, the permanent search for, it's even more than when he was defining this phenomenon back then, but this search to connect, meaning people want to connect today, which I would say is not a bad thing, meaning they want to also do what they're supposed to, but they want to connect, and a lot of times the connecting sort of trumps the doing because you're supposed to. And in the essay, he really tries to highlight Dafka, the metaphor of the romantic relationship with God. And he says that, there is no word mechuyavut in Tanakh. The word that really is used is ne'emanut, is loyalty. And he says it actually means obligation, if you look at the different ways it appears in Tanakh, but it's a much softer word. And if you look at a marriage relationship, we don't please God, we don't wake up every morning and say, I'm not sure, do I want to be here, right? Meaning that would be an exhausting way to be in a marriage. Obviously, maybe couples have different moments in their different chapters in their life that require different ways of thinking, but there is a commitment to be there sort of hopefully through thick and thin. And that metaphor, which of course is one of the metaphors that exists in Tanakh, it's in Yirmiyahu, it's in Hosea, and elsewhere, that maybe is really the metaphor that should kind of trump in the language that we utilize today in our relationship with God.
That's beautiful. I loved Rav Amital. I adored Rav Amital. He went on sabbatical and he came to New York. And he lived with the Moed family on West 81st Street, who are members of my shul on the Upper West Side, the Jewish Center. And every morning he would come to daven Shachris in my shul. This is for a few months in the 90s.
Yeah.
And after davening, I would say, Numa oseh harav hayom. So he would say he's going to the Museum of Natural History or to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it was such a limud for me. Someone who was just larger than life for me, who went through what he went through before he came to Medinat Yisrael. It wasn't Medinat Yisrael yet. And what he created, and to live this life of balance, and to see godliness in nature and in the world and in art. That's a piece of what you're talking about how to bring the emotion, the connection, the hitchabrut into the ne'emanut, and it's really all one. And there's a real world out there that can inspire us.
Okay, so I want us just to dig a little bit deeper into the mitzvah of simcha, because we initially started by speaking about how the Halacha, or we started in the Gemara, how the Gemara defines what the simcha is by giving it quantifiable actions. And there we spoke about the fact that the Gemara comes to the conclusion that for men it's with yayin, and because there's no more Beit Mikdash, and for women it's with clothing. But the halachic definition of this mitzvah actually continues to shift throughout the tides of history. So why don't you bring us into that piece?
So the Gemara says, quotes Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, that Bizman she'Beit HaMikdash Kayam ein simcha ela bebasar, but Bizman she'ein Beit HaMikdash Kayam ein simcha ela biyayin. The Rambam in the Mishnah Torah in Hilchot Yom Tov paskins both basar and yayin. And the Beit Yosef asks, but wait a minute, the Gemara said that Bizman hazeh, there is no basar, there's only yayin. And so we have an answer, we have a number of answers, but the Bach and the Prisha, these are two commentaries, suggest something that I have found in my personal life and others have found to be extremely meaningful. They both say, you know what? Bizman she'Beit HaMikdash Kayam, the simcha of basar, the korban, was on two levels. Number one, I'm in the Beit HaMikdash. I'm feeling God's presence. At the same time, I'm eating meat. You know what? Meat is good. I'm enjoying the meat. It's physically enjoyable and pleasurable for me. Mm-hmm. So there are two levels of the simcha. Bizman she'Beit HaMikdash Kayam. Bizman she'ein Beit HaMikdash Kayam. I still have simcha from basar. It's not the ikar simcha, but I do have simcha. So it's not just only simcha, it's not an either or. There's a middle ground. Mm-hmm. One of them calls it Ikar Simcha and not Ikar Simcha. The other one, the Prisha and the Bach, calls it Simcha K'tzat. So I learned from this something very profound, that Simcha is not everything. When I have a Beit HaMikdash, I'm in heaven. I feel the Shekhinah. Shalosh Regalim, we're talking about Sukkot. There's no Beit HaMikdash. And we're bereft. But you know what? I can feel Simcha, and now I'm talking about it as a feeling, even without the Beit HaMikdash. There's such a thing as middle Simcha. And I'm reminded of the book by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. Sheryl Sandberg was a technology executive. Adam Grant teaches at Wharton, which is the School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Her husband died 1 second in his early 40s. He just dropped.
On a trip to Mexico on a treadmill.
On a trip to Mexico on a treadmill. And she wrote a book with Grant called Option B. Option B. And you know what? So much of life is option B. Mm-hmm. We don't always get what we want. We don't get option A. We don't get our equivalent of a Beit HaMikdash. We don't have it. But that doesn't mean we roll up and crawl into a hole. Because we can't have that, we have nothing, chas v'shalom. Option B means we make a wonderful life with what we are dealt and the situations in which we find ourselves. And that, to me, is Simchat Yom Tov, today and now. There's no Beit HaMikdash. There's no Korbanot. There's no Basar in the classical sense of what it meant when there was a Beit HaMikdash. But look around, Baruch Hashem, there are so many brachot. And that's what we need to lean into and to try to get chizuk from. I get chizuk from Dafka, families who have suffered terrible, terrible, terrible losses. And just miraculously and remarkably, there's an optimism, there's a forward-looking. Our family, Yocheved and I, my wife, became close with Rachel Goldberg. She came to the United States with Rachel Shuransky-Danziger, with her sister Nomi Ansbacher. They stayed with us for 4 days. We were utterly inspired by their presence. And Rachel kept on telling us that after Rav Avi died, she told her kids, Ubacharta b'chaim. Ubacharta b'chaim. And now she's getting remarried.
Yep.
Ubacharta b'chaim. That's amazing. That's option B. That's option B. But you can make greatness from option B. And that's the Bach, and that's the Prisha, and that explains the Rambam, why he mentions Basar even if Bisman Hazeh ain't Simcha Ela B'yayin.
I mean, at this point obviously is salient without me even responding to it, but I just want to respond with one thought, which is that two thoughts. One is that I want to encourage all of our listeners to think for a moment for themselves. What are, I like to call them kelim, like what are the tools that they utilize to really create that simchat hachag? For some people it may be wine, meat, and clothing, and maybe, by the way, the clothing might be on the men's side and the wine and meat might be on the women's side, and we can shift around those definitions.
It's all good.
Maybe those are your kelim. But I'm curious, meaning, and maybe halachically we want to try and be makpid on those kelim, but I'm curious for all of our listeners to think within themselves, what are those tangible items that we are able to like grab onto during these times when we want to pick ourselves up, because it's a human tool that's maybe commanded around the chagim, but we often have to do that, right? I'll give a really silly example, but like for my husband and I, like a real lifeline of ours, and it's always been a lifeline, but it's definitely been more important in the past 2 years, is going for a cup of coffee together. And if we're really makpid, we don't have a croissant. And if we're not makpid, we do have a croissant. Depends if we want to run first. But But like for us, it's not just physical. Like it's a spiritual practice for both of us. It's the together, it's the sharing, we love coffee. It's the joy of the coffee, and we shouldn't put down the physical tools that we use to impact our spirit, because we all have them, but we're not always aware of the fact that our basar is not really just basar, that it does something much deeper for us. And the other piece, I just want to pick up on that as we close our conversation, which I could keep saying in for a long time, but the other thing I want to say is that we in this country have had, I would say, daily practice in those micro moments of choosing to be satisfied with the moment. Some people, for so many reasons, have just been ambushed by the reality, and I want to put that here and recognize that. And maybe at a future time, they'll be able to leave chor b'chaim. Not everybody can take that path really by the horns right away, but there has been nothing that has ground. I'm just speaking here for myself and hoping that it reaches those with the candor that I'm saying it. There has been nothing that has kept me more grounded in the past 2 years than focusing on those small moments, recognizing that I can't think broadly at whatever moment it is because I don't have the space internally. But whether the small moment in the early months was holding my newborn son at that time, I literally just like would breathe him in and be like, okay, like to smell life, literally. And for some of us, it could be a great moment with our family, with our grandchildren, with a spouse. Maybe it's that cup of coffee, that there's those tiny micro moments that, as they aggregate, create that profound sense of gratitude. And we can call it option B, or we could call it what life is right now. And I think that these are such important points for just the quality of our life today. Wherever we are, people are dealing with so many different kinds of scenarios, but I love that we've highlighted them through the mitzvah of Simchat HaChag, and I'm sure given everyone thoughts to share and Torah to think about over the Chag.
I appreciate that very much, and I take it in personally. I don't want to be mesiach da'at for a moment from all the sadness and all the challenges and all of the pain. You know, there are chatufim, there are chayalim, chayalim who have been killed. Their families are shattered forever. Chayalim who have been wounded. Yocheved and I try to go to hospitals to visit, and it's very very hard. So that's real, and that's why I love so much what you said, because in that real, to try ad sheyadenu maga'at, to the extent to which we can, to touch moments of meaning and joy and optimism and going forward. And we see it in these families. And we see it in Medinat Yisrael. I still live in the United States, and I'm very despondent. And I come here, and I come closer to coming face to face with this reality. And I have chizuk, and I appreciate so much the direction that you gave to the chizuk. And I think that's the kiyum of Simchat Yom Tov now. The kiyum of Simchat Yom Tov is to find those moments. And that's what provides it for us. And that's what will sustain us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Schacter. Thank you for being here, and Chag Sameach to all our listeners. Thanks for listening to this week's episode from Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please contact the Matan office or email me at podcast@matan.org.il. Please do us and all women's Torah learning a favor and share this episode with all of your friends and family.